Hello and welcome to the FatBoss Guide to the Iron Reaver.
Yes, this fight is a pretty cool fight. You're fighting some giant robot that's flying about in the air, shooting bombs at you while singing Johnny Cash songs.
What more could you want?
It's beautiful.
So this is a two-phase encounter. There is a phase where you need to fight the Reaver on the ground, and there is a phase where she'll go up in the air and she'll start firing all these bombs down at you. Now for this encounter you do need 2 tanks. You want to bring a healer per group and a mixed DPS makeup. Now to start off, we're going to be talking about the ground phase. Now in this particular phase, you want to tank the boss roughly in the middle of the room, more towards the Citadel door than not, and have your raids spread out behind her. Now there are 5 abilities that you need to deal with in this phase.
Now for your tanks to deal with, you have artillery. This is a debuff that when it expires, it will make the boss fire a bomb at the tank that will explode and deal damage to the entire raid. However, the further away you are from the explosion, the less damage you take. So it is the tank's job to make sure that everyone takes the least amount of damage possible from this ability. When your first tank gets this debuff, your other tank needs to taunt the boss while the first tank runs far away from the raid. As soon as the artillery debuff expires, run back towards the boss and taunt again, because at this point the second tank will have to run out with his artillery. Repeat doing this so everyone just takes pretty much no damage at all.
Now for the raid you need to dodge an ability called Barrage. Now the boss will turn towards a player, charge up a shot, and then unleash a huge frontal cone of fire in that particular direction. If anyone's caught by this, they'll take almost lethal damage, and this ability also leaves patches of fire on the ground that deal damage and apply a stacking dot to anyone that stands inside them. Now the closer you are to this boss, the easier this ability is to dodge. If you're stood super far away, you'll take the full brunt of the cone and it'll be very, very awkward for you. So make sure you're stood relatively close. Now the fire that spawns from this ability throughout the fight will in fact move when the boss casts certain abilities, so you need to make sure that you're not stood very, very near these fire patches, just to avoid accidentally standing in them.
Now you cannot stack on top of each other in this first phase because of unstable orb debuffs. The boss will fire orbs at random players, which will leave a dot on the player and anyone within 8 yards. Now this dot lasts 15 seconds and it stacks, and it can easily overwhelm your healers if you have too many stacks, so it is very, very important that you are spread 8 yards throughout the entirety of this phase.
Now every 60 seconds or so, the boss will cast something called Pounding. This channel deals large raid damage for 6 seconds, and really this is the best time to use a healing cooldown, but do note that anyone with unstable orb or fire patch stacks will likely need to be spot healed during this cast. And also, this ability will be pushing any fire that's close to the boss away from her.
Now towards the end of this phase, the boss will start casting Blitz. She'll face a random direction and charge across the room, and she'll do this twice in a row. Anyone hit by this charge will take damage, get a dot on them, and be taken along the room with her. Now you don't have all the time in the world to move from this ability, so do make sure that you do react fast, and this ability will push any of the fires out of the way again, so just be careful. Now after around 2 minutes, the boss will enter her air phase. During this phase, the boss takes 95% reduced damage, so don't bother really doing damage to her.
Now in this air phase, she'll spray out fuel lines across the room, and this fuel doesn't do any damage at first, but it does slow you by 40%. She will then fly past a second time and set all the fuel on fire. This will do a large amount of damage to anyone who's actually caught in the initial ignition of the fire, so as soon as you see where she's going to be placing this fuel streak, make sure you move out quickly so you can survive. On top of this, she'll also send out fire bombs. Now these deal damage to anyone that stood in a little swirly circle, so make sure you don't stand on them when they're about to land, and you have 25 seconds in order to kill these bombs. Otherwise, they'll explode, dealing massive raid-wide damage and increasing the amount of damage you take from future bomb explosions by a large percentage. Now because you don't have anything else to do in this phase as a damage dealer, you need to make sure you switch to these bombs and just killing them off immediately. And always prioritize older bombs than newer ones.
You still, however, have artillery to deal with. This is the same as it was in phase 1, where she'll mark a target and they will explode, dealing damage to everyone in the raid, but dealing less damage the further away you are from it. Now in the air phase, this is now placed on random players instead of the tanks, however it does deal less damage. If you have this, make sure you move far away from the raid as well as any of the other artillery targets. Just pop a personal CD if you have one, explode, and then come back and start killing more bombs. Now after around a minute, the air phase will end and the boss will create a giant landing circle and come slamming to the ground. This will deal damage to the entire raid, but it will also deal nearly 2 million damage to anyone within the circle. Make sure you're not in the circle. Yeah. The circle is bad. When she does land as well, it also pushes loads of fire away from that location, and because there's a shit ton of fire that's just spawned because of that phase where she's setting loads of fuel on fire, it's quite scary, so just be aware that there's going to be a lot of fire moving.
And as soon as the boss has landed, the ground phase will start again, and then from that point, the fight will repeat. If your damage is high enough, it's definitely possible to kill the boss before you get a second air phase, but ultimately if you do, it's not a big deal. You can just keep fighting as if you would normally, and that is the encounter. It just repeats from that point. Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 1, Phase 2.
Yeah, it's pretty much just personal responsibility and not fucking up by getting hit by things, and as long as you can get those bombs down before they explode, which is pretty easy, they don't have all the health in the world, you should be absolutely fine.
But thank you very much for watching, guys. If this guide did help you out, then please do drop us down a like, and we will see you in the next video.
Thanks for watching.